Kia ora koutou katoa, Vanakam, and my very warmest greetings to everyone from the National Council of New Zealand Tamils. And I do thank you for this opportunity for representatives from different political parties to speak to a number of issues that are important in your community as we head towards General Election 2023. The election, of course, is on the 14th of October, and I'm giving this address in late September. It's only a couple of weeks away. And early voting starts on the 2nd of October. I encourage absolutely everyone who is eligible, please make sure you're enrolled and you do vote in this election. It is one of the rights and responsibilities of residency and citizenship in New Zealand that as citizens we can participate in our election in a free and fair way. So please do have your say. And of course, I strongly advocate and seek your support for the Labour Party at this election, for both your party vote and your candidate vote. You've sent through 11 questions in particular for candidates from parties to speak to, and asked that we speak for only between 5 or 10 minutes. So I will very quickly provide some responses to each of these issues. And I do invite you that if you want more detail on any of our policies or any of these areas, you can go to the Labour Party website, labour.org.nz, or you're very welcome to contact me directly. You can email me at michael.wood@labour.org.nz or contact me through my social media channels, and I'm very happy to answer any further questions and provide information. I'll move now to the questions that you've posed, and I'll read out the question and then my response to it. Number 1, Tamil genocide. We are eager to hear your party's position on ongoing Tamil genocide and your plans for advocating justice, peace and freedom for the Tamil people. Well, for the Labour Party, the maintenance and upholding of human rights and the dignity of all people anywhere in the world is central to our values. And our Labour Party here in New Zealand has been intimately connected with the struggles of the Tamil people in Sri Lanka over many years. We remember with sadness some of those events, the terrible riots and violence of 1983, the violent end to the civil war in the early 21st century, and some of the immense suffering that has been experienced by the Tamil community over that period. It has always been the position of the New Zealand Labour Party that there must be a full accounting for any breaches of human rights, and it has always been our position that there should be full and genuinely independent inquiries into the alleged war crimes, the sustained and serious allegations of war crimes in Sri Lanka against the Tamil people. Now, unfortunately, that has not come to pass at this point in time, but that continues to be the position of the New Zealand Labour Party. And we urge Sri Lanka and every other country to find ways forward that focus on reconciliation and genuine justice. There must be truth and reconciliation after conflicts and after political violence if countries want to find a way forward. And we urge the same process in Sri Lanka to resolve some of those long-standing issues and to deal with some of the trauma and violence that has so afflicted your homeland and the Tamil people as well. Your second question relates to high-value job creation. Please elaborate on your party's strategies for stimulating high-value job creation within New Zealand. Well, this is core to Labour's economic strategy. We must move our country up the value chain to develop a more high-value economy with higher wage jobs. Our country for a long time has been very dependent on the primary sector, and it will continue to play an important role in New Zealand's economy. But if we want to grow our economy, if we want to grow our productivity, if we want to grow our national income and lift the living standards of people, we need to grow a higher value economy. And if I can just speak to a couple of key initiatives that the Labour Party has pursued in this area. The first is the implementation of a research and development tax credit, a policy that we brought in our previous term in government. This directly rewards those people in business who are applying high-tech solutions in research and development with a tax credit that recognises the additional risk that they take on and that encourages entrepreneurial, innovative behaviour. It's those businesses who are investing in R&D that potentially lift us up the value chain and create the high value, high wage jobs of the future for New Zealand. More recently and more specifically, and as a further example of this, in Budget 2023 this year, we've provided a specific financial incentive for the gaming sector in New Zealand, a weightless export that has the potential to be a significant exporter in New Zealand and to substantially grow our skills base here in this country. We already have a number of hubs where we have highly skilled people in the gaming sector, including in Dunedin, and if we can continue to help the sector to flourish with a little bit of a helping hand for government, it has the potential to employ many New Zealanders on good wages and move us up the value chain. Labour will continue to grow New Zealand's economy and to grow the value of our economy in those sorts of areas. Support for small business. How does your party plan to support and foster the growth of small businesses? For the Labour Party, supporting the small business sector is really critical. Small businesses are an important part of our economy and of our society and our local communities as well. We did of course provide significant support to small businesses through the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was our government's response of the wage subsidy and other support that helped many small businesses to keep on going. Working in a small business is difficult, so we continue to look at what we can do to provide active support. We've worked with chambers of commerces in different parts of the country, for example, to provide free access to free support for small business people who might be experiencing mental health challenges. We've worked with government departments, including Inland Revenue, to try and find ways of making dealing with government departments simpler and easier to save people time. And we're also starting to regulate merchant service fees. For a long time, this has been a major issue for many small businesses. The fact that if they have customers who use their credit cards in their businesses, they are charged sometimes very high fees for the use of that. Our government has now brought in a process for regulating those merchant service fees that will come in early 2024 that will potentially save many small businesses thousands of dollars per year. Education. Share your party's vision for education at both the school and university levels. The Labour Party has always stood for an accessible public education system so that every person can reach their potential in life, and we continue to invest at all of those levels, starting at early childhood, where at this year's election the Labour Party is campaigning on fully funding early childhood education for 2-year-olds, which will potentially save working families around about $130 a week if they need the support of early childhood education for their 2-year-olds. We're continuing to invest in primary and secondary education by lifting the pay and conditions of our teachers, so we keep the best teachers here in New Zealand. We have a record build of school properties around New Zealand to make sure that our students learn in the very best environments. And across our tertiary sector and post-school education, we continue to invest in our universities. We've established Te Pūkenga, so we have a linked up system of vocational education across New Zealand that more directly links students, employers and training institutions. And under Labour, we have turbocharged the apprenticeship scheme, and tens of thousands of young Kiwis are now getting into apprenticeships because of our Apprenticeship Plus Boost policy, which we now intend to make permanent if we win this election. Housing affordability. Discuss your party's proposals for addressing housing affordability, including strategies related to interest rates. The most important thing for housing affordability is that we continue to increase supply, and that is what we have been very successful at over the last few years. We are now building enough houses to keep up with New Zealand's population growth. Here in Mount Roskill, we have major developments like at Roskill South and Waikowhai, where I live, where we're building thousands of state homes and affordable homes for young families to buy. We need to keep up that progress to give people a chance of having their own home or having a stable place for their family to grow if they're renting as well. We've made our tenancy laws fairer so that those people who are renting can't be kicked out for no reason, and that's something that National would reverse if they come into office. We've also stopped the practice of people from offshore being able to speculate in New Zealand homes, which drives up the price, and that's something that National would turn the clock back on as well. So if you want to keep that investment in housing, both the increase in supply and policies that give Kiwi families a fair chance, we do need your party vote for Labour. cultural preservation and community development. Explain your party's commitment to preserving cultures and supporting community development. Well, I'm very proud that under our government we have upgraded the Office of Ethnic Communities into the Ministry for Ethnic Communities, which gives the ministry a seat at the top table in government to support the diverse range of communities who make up the rich tapestry of New Zealand society in 2023. We've also increased the budget of the Ministry of Ethnic Communities to support our communities by 8 times since the level that it was since we came into office. And that means that the Ministry of Ethnic Communities has been able to provide much more direct support into many of our ethnic communities around New Zealand to preserve culture, to hold events, and to build their capacity. Ultimately, we need to walk side by side with communities. This isn't a job where the state should step in and do everything, but we need to provide the support to you and other communities so that we help to preserve language and culture in the years ahead and ensure that it is passed down to future generations. Climate change. Detail your party's stance on climate change and the support you offer for those affected by its consequences. The Labour Party is utterly committed to the challenge of climate change. It is one of the great moral challenges of our time. We established the Climate Change Response Act, which creates a legal obligation for the government to address climate change and reduce our emissions to net zero by 2050. And we are taking action across every area of government. We've ended new offshore oil and gas exploration. We've put additional resourcing into our public transport system to support more people into public transport and safe walking and cycling. We've worked with large industrial concerns to help them to decarbonise their industries. Places like New Zealand Steel, where a recent deal that we have made with them will reduce New Zealand's emissions by 1% for a $150 million investment from the government. Every single piece of progress we've made, including the clean car discount, which is getting more Kiwis into cleaner hybrid and electric vehicles, every single one of those policies will go backwards under an extreme National and National government who have promised to abolish every single one of those steps that I have just outlined. And we will of course continue to provide support to those communities who have been affected by climate change, such as the Auckland Anniversary Weekend flooding and Cyclone Gabrielle. Our government has committed billions of dollars to support the rebuild and recovery of communities, and also to work alongside communities to consider options for where they might need to relocate or manage things differently in the wake of climate change, which is going to continue to pose significant challenges. Safer communities. Address issues related to gun violence, racism, and your plans for creating safer communities. Our government has taken strong steps on the issue of gun violence. In the wake of the horrific massacre at the Christchurch mosques in 2019, we took firm actions to take the most dangerous guns out of circulation in our communities. And we have now moved to create a firearms register so that weapons have to be registered and they can be kept track of by police. That will give them much stronger tools to stop weapons falling into the hands of criminals and those who would do our communities harm. We've also introduced strong new rules that give police more of an ability to remove weapons from criminal gangs who can use them to conduct violent offences. It is very important to note that the ACT Party has an extreme position on these issues and is proposing to roll back our reforms to the firearms laws, is proposing to abolish the firearms registry and oppose our plans to try and take guns off criminal gangs. If you want to continue with a government that takes a strong stand against the use of weapons to harm people in our communities, we do need your support for the Labour-led government. The scourge of racism in our communities must continue to be combated. There is no place for it at all, and it needs to be combated at every single level, within our communities, through local government, through central government, through our shared endeavours. Our government will continue to speak out against racism and will continue to resource our key agencies, including DPMC, the Ministry for Ethnic Communities, and New Zealand Police, to take a strong stand and say that it is not okay, whether it is verbal or physical violence against people of a different race or a different culture. We never know where that behaviour will lead. Some people say it's just words at time, but we know that sometimes that's where it starts before it becomes even more harmful within our communities. And our government resolutely stands with all of our communities against racism, bigotry and hatred of any kind. The ACT Party, who would be a core part of a right-wing government, has proposed to abolish both the Ministry of Ethnic Communities and the Human Rights Commission, who are some of our key agencies that stand against racism. We're working very hard to establish safer communities as well. We want every New Zealander to feel safe at home, at work or on the streets. We're continuing to boost the numbers of police. We've increased police by around about 1,800 net new police since we came to office, after years of flatlining resource that the national government previously provided. And we've committed to an additional 300 police over the next 3 years. We're giving police additional powers to take action against some of the serious crimes that we see, for example, in the retail sector. It's now an offence that can attract an additional penalty to use a car for a ram raid or to glamorise those activities by putting it up on social media. We've also changed the law so that some of those young people at the ages of 12 and 13 who commit these offences can be taken through the youth court, so that there are clear consequences for their action and that we can get the support we need to break the cycle and get those young people back onto the straight and narrow. But it's important that when we talk about crime in our communities, don't just listen to the politicians who say, I'll be the toughest guy in town. You've got to get to the root causes. And it's a Labour government that knows that if we invest in our young people through decent housing, through making sure that they're in school, that there's support for their families, we know that if that's the case, the vast majority of our young people will contribute and live good lives rather than going down the track of getting into criminal behaviour. So yes, we need clear consequences. Yes, we need to resource our police properly, but we also must break the cycle. And many of the key programs that we're leading at the moment to intervene with our young people have an 80% success rate compared to an 80% failure rate of the boot camps that the National Party is proposing. Immigration policies. Explain your party's stance on immigration, particularly regarding opportunities for refugees. New Zealand has always been a nation of migrants. My family came here around about 160 years ago to seek out a better life. Other families have come here escaping violence and persecution and seeking economic opportunities, and that will continue to be the case. In the wake of COVID-19, we have reopened New Zealand's borders and reformed our immigration system to focus our immigration system on providing opportunities for people to contribute and settle in New Zealand where they have the skills that we need. We've particularly focused on making sure that migrant workers are paid a fair wage and that they have the supports that they need if they experience migrant exploitation. We have increased New Zealand's refugee quota from 1,000 to 1,500 people, and we reached that target in July of this year for the very first time. I visited the Mangere Refugee Resettlement Centre on a number of occasions, and it is wonderful to see people at the beginning of their journey seeking safety and a new life for them and their children here in New Zealand. In this term in government, we've also doubled the family reunification numbers from 300 to 600 people to provide more opportunities for family to settle here and support our refugee communities. And at this election, we've also proposed a new policy called a super visa to enable parents and grandparents of migrant families to come to New Zealand on long-term temporary visas of between 18 months and 5 years. This has been a key request of our migrant communities, and I look forward for us implementing this under a re-elected Labour government. Transport infrastructure. Discuss your party's plan for improving transport infrastructure and addressing public transport costs. Labour is the party of public transport. We're starting the process of building proper linked up public transport systems here in Auckland and in our major metropolitan areas. A re-elected Labour government will begin building Auckland Light Rail and the North Western Busway, connecting it in time with a new crossing to the North Shore and the Eastern Busway that we're already building at the moment. Those key projects will help to create an integrated, linked up mass rapid transit network for Auckland, finally giving the people who live here the ability to move around our city in a congestion-free, pollution-free way as we experience in many other large international cities. We cannot just continue to build more and more roads. That will just create more congestion and more pollution. We've taken other action to support public transport as well. We've made public transport fares cheaper, with half-price fares for under 25s, people on a community services cards, and half-price fares for the disabled community with a total mobility card, plus free public transport for our children under 13. Those cheaper public transport fares will be scrapped under National to pay for their tax cuts for the rich. We've also ended the bus driver shortage by paying our bus drivers a fair wage and working with operators and unions to reform our immigration laws for bus drivers and public transport workers as well. Labor will continue to invest in public transport, whereas National has committed to cutting public transport infrastructure funding by $1.5 billion to build unsustainable roading projects. And your final question, health services and elderly care. Share your proposals for healthcare services and support for elderly citizens. Labor continues to invest in our public health system to be there for all New Zealanders. We've put in place record funding for Pharmac, which purchases medicines for New Zealanders. We've increased it by about 70% over our time in government, which has meant that Pharmac has been able to purchase over 200 new medicines or treatments for New Zealanders. And this election we are committing to a further record increase to Pharmac's funding to get those medicines to people who need them. Under Labor, we've removed the prescription charge so that if our senior citizens or anyone else needs to get medicine from the pharmacy, then cost is no longer a barrier. And that's a policy that's at risk under a National RAC government as well. We've started implementation of the Dementia Action Plan to provide more support to the victims and families of people who experience dementia. And under Labor, you know that you will have a government that continues to invest in the health system. The National Party is promising unsustainable and large tax cuts. It is impossible to invest in the public services like health and education while also having large tax cuts. The Labor Party is here for the many, not just the few, and will continue to invest in housing, education and health for all of our people. I hope those questions are useful for you as you consider your choice at General Election 2023. A re-elected Labor government will focus strongly on the cost of living and other issues that are real issues for Kiwi families at the moment. The National Party might offer you $10 in tax cuts per week, but the cost will be a weakening of our social fabric and less investment in housing, health and education that all New Zealanders will need. And a National Act New Zealand First coalition will be the most chaotic and extreme government we have seen in decades in New Zealand. To avoid that and to keep a government that has been there for you and your families during New Zealand's most difficult times and will continue to serve all New Zealanders, please make it 2 ticks for Labor this election.